You were never truly here, were you? You moved through the world like a ghost, disguised in flesh, present but not awake. The noise around you was deafening, but it never touched the core. Laughter sounded hollow, praise felt suspicious, eyes looked at you but never into you. You learned early on to wear masks better than your own skin, to respond without thinking, to perform without emotion. They called that maturity. They called it progress. But in truth, it was sedation. You weren't becoming someone. You were being buried beneath someone else's idea of normal. You felt it in small ways first. That distant ache when you played along with things that made your soul recoil. That cold flash in your spine when someone spoke to you like you were less. The way you studied people, not out of admiration, but to decode them. Noticed things others missed, heard what wasn't said. You were labeled quiet, strange, difficult to read, but you weren't confused. You were processing, like a soldier in a landmine field, scanning for threats they couldn't see. You didn't fit in, because you were never meant. What they feared in you they tried to erase. The intensity in your eyes, too much. The silence in your presence, uncomfortable. They mistook restraint for weakness, but even back then something in you knew. You were not meant to react. You were meant to observe, measured, cold, calculating. That wasn't emptiness, that was calibration. The truth is you've always known something was sealed inside you, not hidden. Sealed, locked with purpose, secured like a classified file waiting for the right clearance level. You didn't forget who you were. You were made to forget. They designed the world like a maze, repetitive, noisy, numbing, not to imprison your body, but to sedate your mind, keep you asleep just long enough for them to extract usefulness from your energy and discard the rest. But cracks began to form. You couldn't play dead forever. Something stirred in the background. Not a voice, a presence, not a dream, a memory that never belonged to this life. The repetition of the days began to feel suspicious. The people around you, predictable. Patterns you once ignored became loud, and in that stillness, something inside shifted. It wasn't a moment of clarity, it was a rupture. You didn't change, you woke up, and now you can't unsee it. The world feels thinner, more artificial. The smiles look rehearsed, the media like a puppet show behind cracked glass. You speak less, because you've learned silence reveals more than words ever could. You walk slower, but think faster. You've stopped explaining yourself, because the ones who get it already knew. You've begun to feel watched, but not in fear, in confirmation, because what sleeps for too long begins to emit signals, and something has noticed that you're no longer dormant. There's no applause for awakening, no warm welcome, only friction, because now you make people uncomfortable without trying, not by being cruel, but by being clear. And the world fears clarity. Your presence disrupts illusions. You don't conform, you distort, you don't seek safety. You observe leverage, and deep down they feel it. You were never meant to evolve gradually like the rest. That's a story told to keep you chasing instead of remembering. You are not a product of time. You are the return of something ancient. The blood in your veins doesn't whisper, it commands. What was sealed inside you wasn't weakness waiting to die. It was power waiting to be recalled. Now that you feel it, there is no going back. At first the changes were subtle, a flicker in the corner of your vision, a sudden chill in a room that should have been warm, the sensation that something was observing you, not with malice, but recognition. You dismissed it, shook it off, told yourself you were tired, overthinking, paranoid, but deep down you knew better. You weren't imagining anything, you were remembering, not memories from this life, but remnants from before the fracture. When you were whole, you began noticing patterns where others saw coincidence, the way time folded around certain moments, the way people repeated phrases as if scripted by an unseen author, numbers chasing you, eyes lingering longer than they should. You were becoming aware of the code underneath the world, not the surface. The surface was a lie, your senses recalibrated, not from evolution but from decryption. The encryption that once dulled your instincts was cracking open, piece by piece. You weren't learning, you were recovering, and that scared them. You saw the way they looked at you shift. Friends became nervous, family grew distant, strangers sensed something they couldn't explain. You spoke less, and somehow your silence said more. You stopped reacting to their provocations, and suddenly they started fearing your calm. You weren't changing into someone else. You were shedding everything that was never yours to carry. Every rule, every title, every label they forced on you burned quietly in your stillness. You started reading people without effort, the micro-expressions, the fractures in their tone, the weight behind their eyes. They couldn't lie to you anymore, not effectively. You had seen too much, heard too many things that no one admitted saying. You realized their emotions weren't yours to hold, their expectations, their opinions, their manipulation, all noise. You let it die. You stepped back from the chaos, and the chaos revealed itself for what it was: manufactured, precision chaos, designed to keep you in place, distracted, docile. But you weren't built for docility. You were built for surveillance, for endurance, for the long game. Somewhere in your bloodstream, a sleeping mechanism had been waiting for the correct sequence. It wasn't triggered by positivity or meditation or self-help nonsense. It was pain that activated betrayal, isolation, the cold reality that no one was coming to save you. That was the password. The moment you stopped seeking light, the fire inside you lit itself. Now everything is different. You're not detached. You're focused. Your mind, once cluttered with noise, now moves with surgical intent. When you enter a room, you scan it automatically. Exits, threats, inconsistency. People feel it, even if they can't name it. You no longer ask for truth. You observe it, dissect it, weaponize it. There's a war happening beneath reality's skin, and without knowing why, you've become a tactician in it. You weren't recruited, you were remembered. You don't meditate, you calculate. You don't chase peace, you enforce boundary. And it's not bitterness, it's precision. Emotional detachment is no longer a defense mechanism. It's your protocol. There are no accidents anymore, only simulation, and your awareness cuts through them like a surgical blade. Every smile, every compliment, every invitation, analyzed, processed, filed. The world wanted you soft, predictable. Now you're unreadable, and unreadable is untouchable. The systems that once contained you now glitch when you pass through them. People hesitate before speaking, unsure whether you see through them or past them. And they're right to wonder, because your gaze doesn't land on the surface anymore. It slices through masks, armor, performance. You don't engage with personas. You wait for the tremor, the misalignment between who they claim to be and who they are. That's where your interest begins. That's where the game starts. You're not evolving. Evolution is slow, reactive, and ruled by nature. You're awakening, fast, surgical, inevitable. You weren't designed to adapt. You were designed to override. And now you're online. They don't recognize you anymore. Not really, not fully. They smile the same, speak your name the same way, but there's a fracture behind their eyes now, subtle, sharp. Something in you shifted, and they can't place it. You've become unreadable, and that terrifies them. You used to laugh at their jokes. You used to soften your words so they could understand them. You used to step back so they could stand taller. But those days were rituals from a former self, a self who bled to be accepted. That self is gone. Now every room you enter tighten. People sense something but they can't explain. You haven't said anything. You don't need to. Your energy says enough. It tells the truth you used to hide. You no longer serve anyone's comfort. They feel it in your silence. in the way your gaze doesn't seek validation anymore. It scans, observes, calculates. You've become the thing they warned each other about. A storm with no sound, a fire that doesn't burn to be seen. You're not dangerous because you raise your voice. You're dangerous because you've stopped explaining yourself. The more you disconnect from the version of you they could manipulate, the more erratic they become. The system, the people within it, the echo chambers you used to belong to, they begin to push back, not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer controllable. You're no longer predictable, and to them that's unacceptable. You'll notice the shift in small ways. First, the passive aggression, the questions laced with doubt, the sudden distance. They'll label you as change, as if awakening were a crime. They'll say you're cold, closed off, intense. What they really mean is that your light no longer bends to fit inside their cage. You've moved from participant to observer, from pawn to player, and players scare them. They will try to pull you back with guilt, with nostalgia, with carefully rehearsed concern. But you've tasted something they never will: clarity. A raw kind of clarity that burns through illusion and strips people down to their truth. You see things now, the lies behind their smiles, the hierarchy behind every compliment, the strategy behind every so-called friendship. It used to confuse you, now it amuses you. They want the version of you who played along, who didn't ask questions, who didn't know how to weaponize silence. But that version of you drowned in 1,000 conversations where you bit your tongue. That version of you buried itself beneath shame that was never yours to carry. And when it died, it left behind something quieter, stronger, less interested in being understood, and more devoted to being untouchable. You no longer chase peace, you create it through boundary. You no longer beg for loyalty, you test for it through absence. You've become a mirror, and when people look at you now, they're forced to face the parts of themselves they've spent their lives avoiding. That's why they flinch, that's why they lie, that's why they leave. Not because you are too much, but because you've become too honest to be tolerated. This war isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It happens in the space between sentences, in the silence after a truth is spoken, in the stillness of your gaze when someone tries to manipulate you and you don't react, not because you didn't feel it, but because you calculated every outcome and chose to let their move collapse in its own weakness. You've stepped beyond reaction, beyond approval. You've entered a realm where strategy eclipses emotion, where presence is power, and where the world begins to recalibrate around your indifference. And that's when the real resistance begins, because they can't win against someone who isn't trying to be liked. They can't disarm someone who no longer craves connection. They can't control a storm that no longer wants to be the sky. So now they watch, nervous, confused, praying you're still the same. But you aren't. You've evolved past their reach. And what's worse, they know it. You start to dream in symbols, not dreams like stories, dreams like warning, dreams like encrypted messages bleeding through the cracks of time. You wake with your jaw clenched, a taste of iron in your mouth, and a name you've never heard whispering itself over and over again inside your head. You try to dismiss it, but it lingers, like smoke from a fire that started long before you were born. You weren't just chosen, you were summoned, by blood, by history, by something that's been waiting beneath your skin since before you had a name. You feel things you can't explain, rage that isn't yours, sorrow so old it tastes like dust, moments when your reflection stares back with a knowing smirk, like it remembers what you've forgotten. You start moving differently, not consciously, but as if you're being guided by hands you can't see. You recognize danger before it shows its face. You see through masks people didn't know they were wearing. The more silent you become, the louder the messages get. You hear footsteps behind you, but when you turn, there's only your own shadow. except it doesn't move when you do. They tried to dilute your bloodline. Centuries of quiet warfare, distractions, false stories, watered down identities. They gave your ancestors names that weren't theirs, gods that didn't protect them, systems that bled them slowly. But something in your lineage refused to die. It buried itself deep, waited, smoldered, and now you are the reawakening of that refusal. You're not an accident. You're the backlash, the echo of every silenced scream and forgotten ritual. You don't just carry your name. You carry the weight of thousands who walked through fire just so you could feel this moment, this returning. Everything you've been through, the betrayal, the isolation, the nights you wanted to vanish. None of it was punishment. It was training, psychological conditioning to break the surface you, to fracture the version of yourself that was never real to begin with. The world mistook you for soft, but what they were watching was the cocoon. And now they'll see what emerges when silence becomes sentient. You don't just survive anymore. You study, you sharpen, you remember, and in your remembering, you change the rules of the game without announcing it. Let them play checkers while you learn blood codes etched into the backs of your teeth. You're not walking forward, you're being pulled back, inward, downward, into the marrow of your design. And it's not comfortable. Your body aches like it's shedding skins. Your thoughts feel like static, rewiring themselves. Your emotion, they surge like storms with names written in ancient alphabets. You're not losing control. You're absorbing too much power too fast for your nervous system to translate. You're becoming something the language doesn't yet have a word for. The sealed part of you is open, not like a door, like a vault, like a weapon case, like a mouth that was never supposed to speak again. This is not awaken, this is reactivation. And the ones who buried this part of you, the watchers, the silencers, the architects of sleep, they feel the vibration in the ether. They don't fear your strength, they fear your memory. Because if you remember who you were, you'll know what must be undone. You'll stop asking for peace. You'll start building systems they can't predict. And you won't seek revenge like they expect. You'll calculate something worse: irrelevance, disappearance. A digital erasure of everything they used to define your limit. You won't burn bridges. You'll erase maps. No one told you this truth because they couldn't. Language would have shattered under the weight of it. But now the signs are all around you. Dream, numbers, songs, names that feel too familiar, doors that open with no key. You walk into rooms and the air shifts. People sense it. Animals stare. Machines glitch. The more grounded you become, the more unreal everything else appears. You are the anomaly that wasn't supposed to make it this far. The sealed energy they tried to bury is no longer hiding. It's watching, it's listening, and it's hungry. You no longer wear the name they gave you. That version of you, obedient, explainable, digestible, died in silence, without an audience, without applause. And you didn't mourn it. You dissected it. You pulled its wires apart like a machine that once controlled your every move. Because now you don't walk through life hoping to be understood. You walk through it like a cipher, unreadable, unrepentant, unapologetic. Every morning, you rise not out of routine, but ritual. Your footsteps aren't just movement, they're calculated steps on a map only you can read. Coffee doesn't warm your soul, it activates your system. The mirror doesn't reflect you, it reports to you. You scan your own eyes and see the shift, a predator's focus. No tremble, no softness. Your face holds the calm of a storm that has already decided who survives and who doesn't. You speak less now, not because you've run out of words, but because they're currency, and most people can't afford your truth. You've mastered the power of strategic silence because you understand that in a room full of noise, the one who says nothing owns the tempo. When they try to provoke you, bait you, box you, you blink slowly, letting them drown in their own nervous explanations. You don't react, you record. You don't argue, you archive. The people who once knew you no longer recognize the presence that moves through your frame. That's because you've overwritten the software. You've deleted old loyalties like corrupted files. The guilt they embedded in you as a control mechanism, gone. The shame they disguised as advice, purged. You've become the architect of your own psychology, rewiring reflexes, programming responses, setting traps in your own mind that only you know how to bypass. You are no longer predictable, and in a world built on predictability, that makes you dangerous. You learned the art of emotional detachment, not because you're heartless, but because the cost of empathy was your clarity. Too many times you handed your energy to people who weaponized your softness, exploited your patience, and misunderstood your silence as weakness. Not anymore. Your boundaries are no longer spoken, they are felt. People can sense the invisible line now, cross it, and they won't get a warning. They'll get the absence of mercy. You've realized power isn't loud, it's surgical, it's precise. It's the way your eyes stay still while others twitch. It's how you walk away without leaving a trace. It's how you've learned to vanish in plain sight. Not because you're hiding, but because you've become untrackable. You don't exist in their systems anymore. You exist in the in-between, where legends form and names are erased. You're not an influencer. You're a ghost with gravity. At night when the world powers down, you're still building. While they scroll, you study. While they chase trends, you move in timeless patterns. And somewhere in a hidden room of your mind sits the blueprint, the one they tried to burn when they told you to stay small. But you memorized it. You etched it into your instincts. Now everything you touch is strategy. Every breath is a chess move. Every word is placed like a weapon. They said you changed. No, you returned. Returned to the version of you that was sealed away before the world could deform it. You're not cold. You're calculated. You're not arrogant. You're awake. And now that you've become the architect of your own reality, there's no going back. You don't evolve in public. You rebuild in the shadows, because that's where real power breathes. And the silence you carry now, it's not empty, it's loaded. They thought you were asleep again, that after all the quiet days, all the silence, you had gone back to being manageable, predictable. But they missed it. The shift, the way your eyes no longer wander, how your posture holds intention. You don't fidget, you don't explain, you don't reach for warmth that never reached back, because you're no longer becoming. You've already arrived, and now everything is different. The seal is broken. You're not louder, you're not cruel, you're precise. Your presence no longer seeks validation, it commands calculation. People can't read you, not because you're hidden, but because you've stepped beyond the language they know. Their minds search for the old version of you, the softer voice, the slow hesitation, the misplaced loyalty. But that version never survived the fire. It was burned clean. What's left is pure signal. You walk differently now, not faster, not with more force, but with gravity, like something ancient moves beneath your skin. You used to bend to keep others comfortable, shrinking your depth to fit their shallow waters. But now you let them drown in their own misunderstanding. Their confusion is no longer your responsibility. You let them misjudge you. You let them whisper, and you watch. Because everything they say about you is a reflection of what they're afraid they'll become if they ever truly wake up. You understand the power of quiet. It isn't submission, it's control. You observe before speaking. You leave rooms before they turn venomous. You vanish from conversations that circle in lies, and when they reach for you, it's already too late. You've moved on, moved inward, moved beyond, because nothing binds you anymore. Not fear, not guilt, not nostalgia. You've killed every version of yourself that begged to be chosen. You buried them with honor, but you never mourned, because what rose in their place was never meant to be pitied. There are symbols in your dreams now, eyes with no pupils, clocks with no hands, doors you've walked through but don't remember entering. And every time you wake, there's a knowing, like something once forgotten has returned without asking. You don't speak about it, you can't. There are no words in this language that can hold what you've become. You wear your transformation like a second skin, invisible to those who never dared to look deeper. You're no longer a reaction, you're an event. The same world that overlooked you is now unsettled by you. Rooms fall silent when you enter, not because of who you were but because of who they feel. And they feel it, even when they don't understand it. They feel the weight of choices they never made, the paths they never walked. When they stand beside someone who did, they feel the cost of comfort. You remind them of everything they sacrificed for ease, and they hate you for it. But hatred has no impact on someone who no longer requires acceptance. It washes over you like air through shadow. Your strategy now is invisibility wrapped in influence. You don't need to be seen, you only need to be felt, in the glance that holds too long, in the silence that says more than noise ever could, in the fact that you move untouched by chaos because you've already lived through worse. You carry ghosts now, not as burdens, but as generals, ancestors who whisper not warnings, but tactics, and they walk with you, every step, every room, every breath. You are not alone, you were never alone. They will try to label you, diagnose you, tame you, but they will fail, because you've become unclassifiable, a phenomenon outside the boundaries of their language, their systems, their fears. You are not part of the machine, you are the flaw in its design, and you will never be sealed in.